right.
Had burp. All right, welcome to the Talk Sox podcast. I'm Alex. I'm here with Adam and Maddie again.
Hello.
Hey.
There's been quite a bit that's happened since the last time we got together to record something. And quite a few days of hoping that things would happen, but nothing happened.
Or things happened that we just didn't really like happening.
Yeah, the Slack really blew up for about 3 or 4 days there with just everybody on the same page. It was really great.
Yeah, and I mean, and everything that we talked about in the first episode about how, we wouldn't trade Kyle Teel. He's like the one untouchable guy, and how we weren't really sure if Crochet should be the main target of trades. It just
I don't think any of that was ever said at this point.
It's not too late to delete the first episode, right?
Right. I hope Brock is listening.
So, yeah, but the first episode, I mean, obviously, mostly what we covered were Soto rumors, and that was, I guess not immediately didn't go right out the window, but fairly quickly went right out the window. And for me personally, obviously, there was the sadness of not getting Soto, but it was also mixed with the happiness of him not going in our division.
Absolutely.
I guess it's funny because I kept hearing Toronto as like a possible destination, but no like really substantial rumors ever came. But
it felt a lot like the Ohtani is on a plane to Toronto.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it was even less substantial than that, though.
Right.
Like,
I think we were the Toronto in that situation.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, geez. But yeah, I mean, just to have him not end up in our division, I think is, was like a fine consolation prize to me to not getting him.
Did you see the comments that he made at his presser today?
No.
About how he has not heard from anybody on the Yankees since the end of the World Series. Like, he has not talked to Judge. He has not talked to Booney. He has not talked to Cole. Nobody outside of, I assume, Hal reached out to him.
Wow.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's
a generational talent that was on your team.
Yeah, that seems really strange, honestly. I mean, just thinking about when Ohtani was a free agent and you heard about basically everyone on the planet reaching out to him, kind of thing,
Yes.
Like it's sort of weird to have another guy who is considered, to be that great and not have anyone reach out. I mean, I know the Red Sox had both Pedro and Ortiz kind of had talked to him.
I think Pedroia was rumored at one point. There was the hour-long conversation with Rafi.
Yeah. So, I mean, fair game. They, Red Sox went full press, but I don't think
at the price point, I'm not upset that he's not here.
Yeah, I don't think they were ever going to go that high, and certainly if they went that high, it feels like that would have been something that in a year or two we'd be like, we can't spend any money ever again.
Right. We'd be right back to the John Henry has the tightest checkbook in the history of billionaires.
Right. So instead, we pivoted and ended up with Garrett Crochet, who is at least cost controlled for the next 2 seasons.
He's what, $3 million?
Yeah, something like that. And
25.
I mean, considering that he has arbitration and that arbitration is going to mostly look at his career up until last year as a reliever, he's not going to jump like a super high amount or anything. So it should be
not
pretty affordable.
He's also represented by CAA. They're not looking to, net the highest dollar.
Right, they're not typical Boris style agent. And from everything that's kind of come out, when Breslow called him, he was very excited to be headed to Boston. It seems like maybe an extension has already been approached in some way with him. Probably no numbers, but he at least seems open to re-signing in Boston, which I think is huge.
He was so adamant about wanting an extension when he was a rumored trade candidate during the trade deadline. So it just makes sense that they would extend him.
I think that if you're going to make a trade for somebody like Garrett Crochet, especially with what we talked about last episode, like he advocated for himself, and that's probably why he didn't get moved at the deadline last season. If you're going to trade for him now in the offseason, like, yeah, you've got him here for 2 more years, but you've got to lock him up long term.
Yeah, definitely, especially with how many players we've already locked up long term, thinking about Rafi and Rafaela and stuff,
Bayo.
Yeah, with those players locked up, you're thinking that it's not just a short 1 or 2 year contention window. So
yeah, agreed. Especially if they start talking about offering deals to Roman Anthony, kind of taking the Braves model, Brewers model too, I guess, and extending them before they ever really hit the majors, which I think is very possible with Roman Anthony.
Yeah, definitely. And but who knows? Last episode we probably would have said the same thing about Kyle Teel, and sure enough.
Should have extended Blake Swihart when we could have.
So close. Yeah, and I mean, as far as Crochet goes, last season he had 4.1 baseball reference WAR, which is something that we haven't had from a Sox starting pitcher since 2021's Nathan Eovaldi performance. So it's definitely something that we've been missing. I mean, obviously we just saw Eovaldi re-sign with the Rangers, so ex-Red Sox off the board there. But it's it's something that we really needed, and he's probably going to slot in as the Sox's #1 starter, barring any other moves. And even with any other moves,
I really think he has to. Maybe Corbin Burns takes over as the #1 should we sign him, but I think that the vote of confidence to hand somebody as young as Garrett Crochet the ball, and this is over, like the opening day starter is overblown in my opinion, but to hand him the ball on opening day and be like, you're the guy, you're the one who's going to lead this rotation, I think that that's a huge statement to him as well.
I mean, the opening day starter thing, I think, is a little overblown, but when you look at the history of #1 starters in Boston, when you had like such a long streak of Clemens being opening day starter, and then you had Pedro being opening day starter all those years in a row, and then, Schilling and Beckett and then Lester, it kind of really went through. Maybe Lester really was like the last one who really did it like a bunch of seasons in a row. And then you kind of got to the Buchholz and Eduardo Rodriguez kind of,
Corey Kluber.
People. Yeah, exactly. And then we finally have gotten to the last couple of years where it's sort of just and it's whoever we've signed most recently, kind of thing.
Well, it was supposed to be Chris Sale last year, according to Alex Cora.
Right.
And then he got shipped off.
Yeah. And, and the thing is I think with Sale as a Red Sox, you would have assumed that he would have been the guy who would have been the opening day starter for his entire tenure here. But he was just so injury prone that it ended up being, you ended up having Eduardo Rodriguez and Corey Kluber and, all these other people just ended up having to step in and be that. So it would be nice if Crochet ended up being an opening day starter and, we extended him and it could be, the next 4 or 5 years, just pencil him in at the top, or, Corbin Burns, someone.
Yeah. I think that the Crochet trade pretty much signals that they're out on at least the big name free agents, especially I think it was Tyler Milliken had the tweet that said that, it's pretty much proof positive at this point that John Henry feels like he was burned by the David Price and Chris Sale contracts. So he's hesitant to hand out big long contracts to pitchers over 30 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he kind of needs to get over that when there are names like Corbin Burns that are still out there who can be an impact pitcher in Boston for the next 4 to 6 years. But I also understand that mentality as well. You know, you had to attach price to the Mookie deal just to get him out of here. And you still had to eat half of the remaining contract.
Yeah, I mean, the way that starting pitchers have been valued right now, you know, they're worth less WAR than they ever have been before.
Absolutely.
Really, you know, just they're not getting used as much. And so I guess I understand, but you know, even when you look at like, well, I wanted to ask you about this because we had obviously talked about Max Fried being such a, you know, being maybe like the free agent pitcher that we wanted to see the most on the Red Sox. What did you end up thinking about his deal?
Sorry.
Go for it, Maddie. No, you
I
get.
was more disappointed that we lost out on Max Fried than Juan Soto, just because he seemed like such a perfect fit for the Red Sox. But I mean, he's 31 and he signed an 8-year, $218 million contract. I mean, that'll look good for like, I guess, 3 years. But if you look at the Yankees core, Aaron Judge, Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, who else? Giancarlo Stanton. They will all be in their like mid-30s in 3 years. And just that core isn't sustainable. And they traded away most of their farm system with Jason Dominguez left. And he's been floating around for how long now?
Yeah, the end of the season, like tug and pull between Jason Dominguez and Alex Verdugo was honestly one of the most bizarre things to watch from afar ever. You're just
it made
like,
no sense.
Yeah, it really didn't. It was like the first time that Yankees fans and Red Sox fans all kind of were in agreement. We're all like, yeah, we don't understand why you would be playing Verdugo. Really. But yeah, so I mean, I think that that's actually like a really good point is that with the Crochet deal, you're starting to see how the Red Sox can actually compete in the AL East because, you know, the position player core has been young, largely controllable, if not, you know, by virtue of arbitration, then by virtue of that, we've already locked them up. And, you know, and now if you get the pitching in line, then you're looking at who, you know, you're looking at the Yankees who are always getting older. Their free agent pitching signings have not always turned out the best.
No.
Like at least. So, you know, you're really looking at well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but like it could be a changing of the guards at least from the high end paying teams. You know,
I think so.
But I mean, obviously, it's not like the Red Sox came in second in the division last year or anything. So there are still other teams in the division that were very good. And I guess that kind of brings us back to Corbin Burns, you know, the ace of the Orioles last year. And if this is something that, you know, if the Red Sox can possibly poach him, it becomes a real turning the division on its head kind of thing.
And it doesn't look like there's any interest from the Orioles to bring him back.
Yeah, very weird how they've said that how he said that there hasn't been a lot of contact there.
I think it was either last night or early this morning. I saw a report that essentially the GM in Baltimore has been given permission to spend, and he is just not doing it. The new ownership group is like, hey, go bring us players. And he's like, meh, okay. And just kind of hanging out at the hotel in Dallas.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I am reporting live from Dallas. So just want to throw that out there. We're taking this very seriously.
Did you go to the winter meetings at all?
I did drive by, if that counts.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Then yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll take a photo from like the highway or something next time I have to fly there. But, yeah, I mean, it is funny to hear like the news or hear like Scott Boras, rattling off his one-liners and stuff, and knowing that that's happening kind of like 10 minutes for me. It's like, oh wow, we are in the same city, breathing the same air. So
I guess sort of tied with the Orioles too is it came out today that the Red Sox have had at least some early conversation with John Means.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I don't think is going to move the needle a lot for Red Sox fans, but the Red Sox seem to have some sort of fetish with these like Tommy John guys, like taking their like last year of rehabilitation and then or like half a year of rehabilitation and then trying to see what they can get out of them. Obviously we saw it with Liam Hendricks, and
it'll be interesting to see what his level of contribution this year is.
I mean,
because I think even after
Hendricks is a great clubhouse guy. I mean, that there is
yes,
an intangible benefit from having him in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, if the guys can, understand that accent, then yeah, they'll probably get along great. But yeah, I think Hendricks in general is going to be really interesting. I wrote a piece kind of projecting out both Giolito and Hendricks's pitch mixes based on how people's pitch mixes changed from, before Craig Breslow took over into when Craig Breslow took over. And both Hendricks and Giolito have just really great breaking balls and, turning their pitch mixes into, more breaking ball heavy, I think should really help a lot. But we need to see, obviously, where their health is. That's the main thing.
Absolutely. It kind of worried me when Hendricks ended up getting shut down at the end of the season in AAA again. Makes me hope that he's going to be able to contribute at a big league level, because I think out of all the internal options, even after signing Aroldis Chapman, Hendricks is probably our best bet as a closer right now. I think Slayton could do it. I think Slayton can be an effective closer given some time. I think Whitlock could step into a closer role. But I think that right now you kind of have to go forward with Hendricks penciled in as your closer, Chapman as your setup man.
I mean, you did some, reporting for us on what Arenado looked like in person, seeing him. And I have to say, I got to witness Chapman up close here when he was with the Rangers, and it was worrying most of the time. If for Red Sox fans, I think if you want to imagine something, you want to imagine like the end of Craig Kimbrell's tenure with the Sox, kind of, is basically what you're experiencing with Chapman. It's a tightrope of, is he going to throw strikes? Is he not? What are we really going to get out of him? So, that I think that's an interesting signing. That obviously was the first thing that happened after our last podcast, and didn't quite require an emergency pod or anything, but it was.
No, I'd prefer if we didn't have to talk about it.
But it is something that I think is I don't know. It makes me like a little worried.
Yeah.
I don't think he
I
really
get the projection. You hope that working with Bailey can unlock something again, but man.
he doesn't have the kind of control over either one of his pitches really that makes me feel like if he is going to be more breaking ball heavy, that it's something that he can throw for a strike, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's scary for a reliever. Now, as far as other internal options go, I do think Hendricks is probably the best one. But I think if the Red Sox really had their druthers, it would be more like signing or trading for another starting pitcher, and then maybe moving one of the guys like Cutter Crawford, to the bullpen. And
I think that's on the table.
do you think it's just Crawford? Crawford is the guy.
If you remember the early reports on the Crochet trade where Crawford would probably be included in it. And so I think that he's going to end up being the odd man out no matter what. And I think that his stuff projects as a bullpen arm better than probably anybody else's. You're not going to give Bayo that contract and then move him to the pen. Unless Houck kind of reverts to the Tanner Houck of old, there's no way you move that to the pen. I think that they probably have too much respect for Giolito to be like, hey, we brought you here, you've rehabbed, now go hang out in the bullpen. So I think that it almost has to be Cutter Crawford.
So you think with Crochet now? Well, I mean, Crochet is probably going to take the place. I kept thinking that Crochet is taking the place of Pivetta, but I guess I was ignoring the fact that Giolito is going to be in the rotation.
Right.
Do you think Cutter could be moved in a trade?
Yeah, I really do. I think that, and we can get into specifics if we want to. I think that in these rumored talks with the Mariners, I think Cutter makes a lot of sense to head out to Seattle as part of a package for Luis Castillo.
I mean, I could see him moving. I was surprised to see that he made the most starts of any Red Sox pitcher last season. So, like,
it doesn't feel like it.
I mean, I think if you looked at how many home runs he gave up, you would hope that
right,
right, Red Sox pitcher. But yeah, I mean, so he was able to take the ball for the most part. So that's something that the Red Sox definitely need. An innings
absolutely
back of their rotation would be great, especially because I mean, I think we all want to be really excited about Crochet, but Crochet does also have kind of a long injury history, so it's not a guarantee that he's going to be he's going to start 20 to 30 games for you.
Right, that's what you want to project on him, but you just really don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, but Cutter Crawford, I think of the pitchers that we currently have that could be in the rotation, you have to think that he is the one that has the most obvious bullpen kind of pedigree. And you just hope that in short bursts, he gives up fewer home runs per nine.
And I think his stuff would play up if you moved him to the pen as well. He's definitely not like a power arm, but if you move him to the pen, that delivery becomes different enough that it could be maybe a little tricky to track the ball out of his hand, and then that fastball will play up a little more.
Yeah, I wish I had the first time through the order like numbers in front of me, but for some reason, I think that I remember him being pretty good the first time through the order and him having like a pretty severe second time through the order penalty. So you would think that that would help, but I guess don't quote me on it since I didn't actually pull up the numbers.
It sounds great.
And then I guess we should talk about the other end of that Crochet deal, which was that we did send Kyle Teel off. And the whole thing, what we were talking about, at least from the Kyle Teel perspective last time, was that we didn't think the Red Sox should move him because we don't really have a lot of great catching prospects, and we are unsure of Connor Wong. At least it seemed like the organization was unsure of Connor Wong towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
So this really kind of leaves us with just Connor Wong and then the newly acquired Carlos Narvaez from the Yankees, who, I mean, if you had asked me who is the Yankees' backup catcher that far down the line, I wouldn't have gone to Carlos Narvaez.
Fourth on the depth chart.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought third. Okay, fourth. So
yeah,
so I'm not sure that he's really the guy that you're thinking is going to definitely be the backup to Connor Wong.
It looks like, just from kind of hopefully reading between the lines, he's going to be mostly AAA depth. And that there's still hopefully some sort of plan at catcher. But with Teel, I knew, the report came out that out of the prospects, Anthony and Campbell were untouchable. And that makes sense, even if there's an argument to be made that technically nobody should be untouchable if the right deal is in front of you. Like, I would trade Roman Anthony for either one of the Mariners' top two starters. Like, that's a pretty easy deal for me. Yeah, it would suck to lose, him in the system, but you're getting a bona fide starter who could start, and not to say Crochet's not, but I would trust Logan Gilbert to start game one of the World Series,
Yeah.
And if that's the deal that you're making for Roman Anthony, you have to at least entertain that idea. But I kind of figured that Kyle Teel was in that same tier without them saying it, because there was no catching depth. It looked like he was going to end up breaking camp with the big league team as the backup catcher this year, as it stands right now, as it stood.
Breslow said something, I think, in the beginning of November that they wanted to let him marinate in AAA and have more time to develop. But like you said, it just seemed like he was going to be the next catcher for the team, and we were wondering if Wong would be moved to backup or even traded sometime.
Yeah, and I think that with Teel, when Teel was still in the system, the thought to keep him at AAA, to get him more reps, to get him used to higher level pitching, was an excellent idea. But unless, even without trading him, if this was the path we're taking, there was no one to step in front of him. He was going to have to break camp with a big league club, or you're entering the season with a catcher.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, I think that whether Teel was moved or not, a move for Narvaez or a move like that had to have been on the table, because the Red Sox just don't have the type of catching depth to do. Once Danny Jansen signed with Tampa, it was just like, we need another catcher.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's like a legitimate plan in place to add another catcher right now. Like, I know there's some rumblings with Minnesota looking to shed salary, that maybe a reunion with Christian Vasquez could be in line. I don't know that. I mean, I love Christian Vasquez, but I don't know if I love that with the contract he has there.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, like, Christian Vasquez is kind of like the older version of Kyle Teel, isn't it? Isn't he kind of, like a
for sure, absolutely,
first catcher who, I guess with Vasquez, you always kind of hope that would get there, and occasionally it showed promise, but it definitely
was always a feel good story.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't. His batting hasn't gotten any better since he left Boston. So
No, absolutely not.
So yeah, I mean that again, you're talking about a backup catcher who is probably, he's probably ahead of Narvaez, but not by all that much. So I don't know if I can't think of off the top of my head someone who would be a catcher who would be like a trade candidate unless I don't know.
There was the Sean Murphy rumor a couple days ago. And I don't hate that.
I don't
but if
hate
you're going
it.
to trade for Sean Murphy, then Wong becomes a backup. Obviously, like you're not going to trade for Murphy and stick him behind Connor Wong.
Right.
And his contract too is tied up.
That's a large contract.
It's a large contract, especially for a guy who had such a mediocre offensive season last season.
Mm-hmm.
That was really one of those deals where you couldn't believe what the A's got back, and you kind of thought like, wow, the Atlanta really fleeced him. And then it kind of turns out that maybe Milwaukee ended up getting the absolute best part of that deal. So, but as far as, from position player wise, you're talking about, I don't know, Wong has to be our number one catcher right now. Do you think that's how we go into the season? Or do you think
barring a trade for somebody like a Sean Murphy, yeah, I think Wong has to be the number one catcher.
All right. And then I guess that sort of leads us into our other big position player kind of news is that, they reported that Casas is officially on the block, or at least is more on the block than maybe we thought. I mean,
he's being dangled out there.
Yeah, I mean, last episode we definitely talked about him being a potential trade candidate, despite how much it would hurt Maddie's feelings. And then there have been multiple reports now that he is being dangled and that he's being talked about in relation to Seattle. And so, I don't know, I guess, that Casas for Castillo deal seems to be the one that is percolating the most.
What was it, Alex Spear that posted late last night that he asked around about it and was told unequivocally, no, Casas for Castillo is not going to be the deal?
Oh, okay, so I didn't read that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Spear, and I mean, Spear. Like, I trust everything he says. And I know that it came out earlier this week that the Red Sox had offered Casas for Brian Wu, and Seattle said no.
So it's funny because there have been so many ties, it seems like, between Casas and Seattle, but like, does Seattle like Casas? Are we sure that that's?
I mean, if the way I see it, if somebody's offering a potential 40 home run first baseman for your number 5 starter, that's a deal you jump at 10 times out of 10. So maybe it's no wonder they haven't won a playoff series in how long?
Oh, that's rough. Or Seattle.
I mean, if you're making those, if you're saying no to that kind of deal, like you've got to question the decision making all the way up to the top at that point.
I mean, unless go ahead.
Sorry. I wonder if teams are concerned about his injury history that's frequently brought up.
It was just such a weird injury to keep him out for like the whole season. Like, even when I've had it explained to me, I'm still sort of like, people are still kind of like, we don't know how he managed to do this. Like, to swing that hard to damage cartilage that's going to keep you out for most of the season is kind of like, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, didn't he say that they told him that like his swing is effectively a car crash inside his body?
Something like that.
Like he had yeah. And I mean, you got to kind of take everything that he says with a grain of salt after the, hey, it feels fine. And then he turns around and is like, it feels like I'm being stabbed and shot every time I move. So I don't know if I buy the car crash line, but it's such an odd injury that has to happen because of his swing. I mean, that's the only way that's going to happen because he does have such a powerful swing that I think that the chance of re-aggravation is probably decently high.
Unless he changes it, but then he loses his power, so he has to find a way to keep it.
It
and
opens up a completely different can of worms. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how does he maintain his power without the possibility of causing another car crash in his cartilage?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe is something that's deterring, other teams, Seattle specifically. I mean, also the fact that I think at this point, Corbin Burns is sort of the one last guy really on the free agent market that can fill like the void that the Red Sox need. Otherwise, you're talking about they have to trade. They have, amazing prospects. So maybe teams like Seattle are like, okay, Casas is fine, but, who else can we get?
Let's talk about Marcelo Meyer.
Yeah, exactly. Will you also throw in your, also very injured from last year prospect Marcelo Meyer, kind of
right?
And I think we had discussed Marcelo Myers as being the guy that we would most trade, but maybe I wasn't at least thinking about his injury history and how much that did affect last year for him, and how maybe teams aren't valuing him as quite as highly as if we're talking.
I think there's something to be said for the fact that none of his injuries are related. They're all like in different parts of his body. It's not a continual shoulder issue into an elbow issue into a hand issue. Right. But I mean, he's been with the organization for a few years now, and I don't think he has finished a season. Or if he did, it was his very first season is the only one that he actually finished all the way through. And so I do think that that's telling. But I also kind of bringing it back to Casas, I think that rib injury might be one of the reasons why the Red Sox are so keen to dangle him out there in these trade talks. And kind of with like the rehabbing pitcher thing, like it does seem like there are a lot of rehabbing pitchers who want to come to Boston. So our medicals have to be good to some respect. But, there might be a team out there that is like, oh, we've had a similar injury. We know how to deal with it. That would be willing to take Casas off the Red Sox hands. And I'm not advocating for trading Tristan Casas. Like I love Casas, but I think that if the right deal presents itself, kind of like with Roman Anthony, if the right deal presents itself, I think that you have to be willing to move on from somebody like Tristan Casas to open your window even further. Even though he should be part of any core that's built here in Boston, there are people like Pete Alonso who could be signed and slot into first base next season, or after next season, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. becomes a free agent. And if there is hopes that he comes to Boston, Casas is expendable at that point.
You mean hopes from you, right?
Oh, I would buy so many jerseys the day he signed.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
both City Connects, if the new one comes out.
But if Casas gets moved, it is purely for the idea of moving Devers to first, because
for at least a season.
You think Devers to first for one season and then moved on to DH after that or something?
Yeah, that's kind of the way things seem to be presenting themselves. Is I think that if Masataka Yoshida is not traded this offseason and he's not moved at the deadline, that contract after the 25 season becomes so much more digestible for any team. And then you're getting a left-handed left fielder at best, but he's obviously not a DH, but he can play a passable left field. I think that you would have a team that would be willing to take on the remaining years and at least most of that money to get him off the Red Sox books, which would open up DH for Devers, which then opens up first base for any number of options, be it through another trade or through free agency.
Yeah, I actually just wrote about Yoshida, and I was actually sort of surprised. Like I hadn't really looked at his numbers that closely, but according to Baseball Reference, he's been worth 1.4 WAR the past 2 seasons, and he played less games last season than he did in his first season. He's trending in the right direction, and at least with some of the players that have come over from Japan, you're talking about their 3rd or 4th season being their best season. Their 4th season was Ichiro's
Absolutely.
season. So, I mean, he's trending in the right direction. He's a little older than Ichiro was in his 3rd and 4th season, but I think there is reason to believe that he's going to be even better this season, whether that's with the Red Sox.
I agree with that.
And so, maybe he is a trade candidate, midway through the season or next off season. But I think that, I think that this off season, he is not going to look attractive to many teams.
And there seems to be a lot of smoke, and I don't mean from like reputable people, but just like on X, Twitter, whatever, and Blue Sky about, well, it makes perfect sense to send Massa to the Cardinals because Chaim Bloom's there. We get Arenado back. Arenado has said he'll play first base. He can play third. You've got options. But I assume people are forgetting that immediately after Chaim Bloom was gone in Boston, it came out that after signing both Yoshida and Trevor Story, he was like, I don't think I should have done this. He had instant regret about both of those contracts. So I don't see him, and he's not in charge this year. Like he takes over after 25, but I don't see him angling to get Masataka Yoshida to St. Louis.
Yeah, I don't really think this is like a Theo going to the Cardinals and then being like, well, I really like working with Ross,
I like these
or whatever. Exactly. It's not really the same thing. You don't get like fired from your job for like, 2 big contracts that kind of look like albatrosses, and then are like, let's bring them along,
Yeah. And so I always thought that was not, I mean, I think that there is some smoke to the Arenado rumors. People who are friends with him, like Jared Carabas, seem very keen on it, which makes me think that there is something there. But Arenado to the Dodgers makes a ton of sense, and it's well known that he loves playing in LA. And so I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that if he's traded, he's coming to Boston. And like I talked about in the last episode, offensively, he's a shell of himself. This past season, I think we went to 3 games where you could really check out when he stepped up to the plate. You knew that if he got a hit, it was going to be a squibber through the middle. There wasn't going to be any loft on the ball. Whereas 2 seasons ago, if Arenado came to the plate, you were paying attention because he was going to end up hitting something at least to the wall. And he can take aim at the monster, but there's no loft in the swing. And so you can take aim at the monster all you want, but if you're hitting line drives to left field, they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
And to me, he makes no sense.
No, and the whole thing about, he can play first, he can play third. It's like if you're getting Nolan Arenado, you are getting him because you want decent third base defense, like
because he's a multi-time Gold Glove third baseman.
Yeah, and even as he's getting older, he's still playing a solid third. So I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
If the Red Sox got him, it would be to move Devers over.
For sure.
Like straight up, And I think
if it came down to Arenado or Bregman, I think in this situation you have to Bregman's the play.
Yeah, I mean the swing.
He's had a couple down seasons, but he's better than Arenado.
Yeah, his swing is like made for Fenway. He's such a
my gosh,
happy hitter, and it's probably going to end up being a lot of like singles and doubles off the wall, but still, I mean, the Red Sox
runners on or runners on.
Right. And I mean, we all loved Mike Lowell for basically doing the exact same thing, not a ton of
absolutely.
home runs, but, he was a doubles machine in Fenway. And so, Bregman is the same way. And I think like, of the Astros guys, it always seemed like Bregman was the one that I thought would be most likely to come to Fenway because of, being a kid and really loving Pedroia, right? Isn't that like the story of Bregman?
Right.
That
it's like his
Pedroia,
idol was Dustin. Yeah.
Yeah, like saw him like play in college and was just like, I want to play like that guy kind of thing. So, I mean, it always just seemed like Bregman would be the kind of like guy who would fit the best at Fenway. So I wouldn't mind it. But
I don't absolutely love it. I think that out of the free agents that you would have brought in to maybe shift to third or take over third, I think Adames was maybe the one that made the most sense. And even then, that's not a deal that I love. Bringing in a free agent to make them switch positions doesn't make sense to me.
So
if you're going to sign Adames, you want to sign him to play shortstop.
It does seem like that's
like the Bregman the second thing.
Yeah, the Red Sox do seem to have like a history of that. Sign Hanley Ramirez, put him in a position he's never played before. Move Trevor Story second. It's just it's something that
which
the Red
that
Sox,
one panned out, but
yeah, that one did pan out, but it's one of those things where. I think that positional versatility is like really valued, but then sometimes they just try to over apply it maybe a little bit too much.
Yeah. A team full of Brock Holtz.
Right.
Kike Hernandez.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the Red Sox.
Oh gosh, Kike at shortstop. Jesus.
But I mean, that does seem to be like what the Red Sox love the most, and kind of also the reason that they ended up signing Rafaela for his contract was mainly because he is a potential platinum glove center fielder, and in a pinch they're going to move him into a middle infield. So.
Even Campbell is pretty flexible. He profiles as somebody who has to play on the right side of the infield at the pro level, but technically you could slot him in at second, short, and third. Yeah. Do we see Campbell up at any point this year? I know this isn't part of our notes, but
I feel like he's probably. I think that there's going to be pressure to have him up. I think if things,
especially if Grissom struggles early,
right? There's going to be pressure. Wow, I haven't even remotely thought about Vaughn Grissom. I sort of forgot we had him. But yeah, I think if there's any type of struggles or injury, like that is going to be the guy that Red Sox fans are going to want called up immediately. And I think that, depending how he performs, maybe it will be called for, but he is actually.
I think Grissom deserves a legitimate fair shot at the starting second base job.
100%. I mean, in this small sample size where he played in September, he looked pretty good.
He did.
Defensively and offensively. And he's a right-handed bat. I mean, so is Christian Campbell. So it'll be interesting to see who earns the starting second base job after spring training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Vaughn Grissom in general, God, it was such like a weird season for him last season. coming back from that injury and then basically being healthy, but still being in AAA for, most of the season.
He lost like 15 pounds when he got the flu right at the start of the season and never could really put the weight back on.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. And I think I think Red Sox fans, if Chris Sale hadn't put up a Cy Young season immediately after leaving, I think they would have maybe been a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah.
But because of that, it became kind of like, I don't know, it became a lot like the Mookie Betts trade of like, oh, and none of these guys can play either kind of thing. It's like, great, you gave up Chris Sale for nothing.
Yeah. That being said, I don't think that he would have had that type of season had he stayed in Boston for 24. I don't think that Chris and Boston meshed anymore.
Yeah, I don't really either. I'm not sure if it's just because, I don't know, maybe like our medical staff and him weren't, always on the same page or something, but
he rode too many bikes.
The fact that he did not stay healthy basically any season he was in Boston, and then, managed to basically a full healthy season up until the very last start.
The very end, yeah.
In Atlanta was kind of like, oh, this is what we really were trying to get when we got him.
Right.
But I mean, hey, flags fly forever, I saw some people saying, talking about this Crochet deal and bringing up the Sale trade and saying, hopefully the White Sox aren't fleecing the Red Sox again, kind of thing. And I was like, none of those guys that the Red Sox traded really, it's not like any of them propelled the White Sox to a World Series or anything. And Chris Sale,
there's no demand for Moncada at this point. Yeah. He had a season and a half where he was an all-star caliber player in Chicago. Michael Kopech is now figuring things out, but he's in LA.
Yeah, he needed to go to LA to really figure it out.
It just, in my opinion, the Red Sox won the Chris Sale trade pretty handedly, if only because you don't win 18, in my opinion, without Sale.
Right, exactly.
There's no way. And I'm not saying that Garrett Crochet is going to do that. And I think that trying to compare the Crochet trade to the Sale trade doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because when Sale was traded, he had he was 5 times in the top 3 for the Cy Young. Yeah. He had multiple seasons of 200 innings thrown, or at least 175, and he was 2 years older than Crochet. Yeah. And didn't come with the injury history. And so while Kyle Teel and Braden Montgomery, who we haven't even talked about, because he's kind of the unknown in all this, just because we haven't seen him play baseball since the College World Series when he broke his ankle.
Yeah.
Now, it's my opinion that if he was healthy, Tennessee doesn't win the College World Series probably, because I don't think that they really had an answer for him. But I don't think that we gave up, quote unquote, too much for a starter who realistically is going to be the day one starter, who, if we make the playoffs, is going to be the game one starter in the playoffs. I mean, Chase Mydroth was never going to get a call up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Wikelman Gonzalez, I don't know what people actually really liked about him. His stuff was fine, but not great.
Everything I've heard about him seems to be like he's a guy that people can dream on more than they can actually, see concrete stuff.
Would you not rather have Garrett Crochet than dream about Wikelman Gonzalez?
No, yeah, exactly. And I think, honestly, when the Sale trade happened, I was all for the Sale trade.
I was so excited.
I loved that deal because of the same thing. People were like, "Oh, Moncada has the chance to be a talent, and he's the heir apparent to Pedroia. He's going to be the second baseman of the future," kind of thing. And it's, for me, it's always, I get excited about prospects. I like prospects, but
yeah,
absolutely, to bring in a proven MLB player, you have to do it, you know? And so I think the same thing can be said here with Crochet. It should be exciting, you know? And that's
Yeah.
I don't even know if Red Sox fans would have been like super excited to break camp with Kyle Teel, you know? They would
Right.
have been, you know, it would have been like interesting, but I don't know. It doesn't move the needle like getting
No.
Crochet. So
It wouldn't be if Roman Anthony breaks camp with the big league club. That's huge.
right.
That is front page, that's front page headlines. Kyle Teel, okay. In my opinion, if Kyle Teel wasn't a catcher, Kyle Teel is probably not a top 100 prospect.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against him. I hope that he does well in Chicago. I really do. But because of his position, he was valued higher than maybe he should be. And that's okay. Because the Red Sox need a catcher of the future. We thought it would be Kyle Teel. Now we have to figure that out. What is somewhat encouraging, though, is the 2025 draft is loaded with quite a bit of collegiate catching talent. And so I think that there may have been kind of an eye on that, too. Is like, hey, if we can get through the year with Wong and whoever, and then, we draft another catcher, because I think that there are some that can go in the middle of the first round. We develop him and he catches fire like a Roman Anthony, like a Christian Campbell, then okay, in the next 2 seasons, we have our answer at catcher again. And that makes Kyle Teel a little more expendable.
Well, Teel and Braden Montgomery were basically lottery tickets that kind of fell in the Red Sox lap during the
Absolutely.
draft. I'm not too pressed about them trading away.
You're kind of playing with house money at that point.
Yeah, for a guy who could be, I don't know, a left-handed Spencer Strider.
I think that there's a conversation to be had that Garrett Crochet could turn into the best left-handed starter in the majors within the next season or two. If he is motivated by the trade to the Red Sox, if he knows that they're going to offer him an extension, he very likely is going to show out and prove to the Red Sox, like, yeah, you did give up a lot for me, but here's why. And I think that the people who are calling it an overpay are insane. Had they given the same deal to Max Fried, those same people would have, that the Yankees did, those same people would be complaining about spending over $200 million on a 31-year-old starter, which is valid, but you're not going to make those kind of people happy.
Yeah.
No matter what you do. There are people who had Juan Soto signed with the Red Sox for $700 million. Be like, well, you could have paid 4 other players for $700 million. True. But you could also have Juan Soto for $700 million. Like, you're not going to make everybody happy, but if your goal, and it seems to be the goal of Breslow, is to put a watchable winning baseball team on the field season after season, you're going to have to get uncomfortable at times. And the first time we saw Breslow get uncomfortable is trading away 2 top 5 prospects for Garrett Crochet. And I think that at the end of the day, and it's going to be years before we can properly evaluate this trade, the Red Sox will come out on top on this trade no matter what. Unless Garrett Crochet loses his arm in a chainsaw accident.
The first instance of Breslow getting uncomfortable this offseason was him signing Chapman.
Yeah.
It should have been if it wasn't.
Yeah. Which I thought the statement that they put out, was that yesterday?
Yeah.
I understand where he's coming from. I understand why Chapman is targeted. Andrew Bailey has mentioned a Chapman-style fastball multiple times in interviews. So the desire to bring him to Boston or anywhere Andrew Bailey goes or went was going to be there. But man, he's just one of those people that, at least for a while, I've got no idea how I can sit and be like, all right, like, Chapman just struck out the side. Like, I can't get excited about him.
Yeah, like, I don't know if you guys have this, but my fiance is she likes baseball because I like baseball kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, she can she roots for the Red Sox because I do. But after the Duran, homophobic slur thing, it kind of became like every time Duran came up, she's like, I can't root for this guy, kind of thing, totally fair. And, Chapman is just going to be another one of those guys.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, every time Chapman comes to the game, I'm going to have to hear about, I'm going to have to hear from her, oh, why did they even sign this guy? And honest, I feel the same way. Why did?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's one of those things that I don't want to have to defend signing him, to someone else, and I'm gonna feel the need to every time he comes in and she's like, oh, why? I'm gonna be like, well, he does have a good fastball.
He can hit 105.
Yeah, exactly. and then I'm just gonna feel crappy about myself.
Yeah.
Oh, why am I defending this guy?
The minute the signing broke, multiple coworkers were like, seriously?
Yeah.
This is what you guys did? I'm like, I don't know. I wish I worked in the front office.
Exactly. And that should be everybody's reaction. And to Maddie's point, it's why that should have been probably really uncomfortable for Breslow to have to tell Red Sox fans. Because I honestly, of the Red Sox fans I know, I don't know anyone who was excited for that signing.
I've ran into a few, and it's all for baseball reasons. Nobody's like, he's a stand-up guy. But even for baseball reasons, like I said, I understand, he does throw 105. And there's something to be said, even in a sport where 100 is no longer something to be marveled at, because so many guys throw 100 at this point. I understand from a baseball point of view what you're hoping to get out of Aroldis Chapman. Mm-hmm. But at this point in his career, like you said, Adam, you're not going to, maybe 75% of the time.
Yeah.
Just because, he can throw 105, but he's got no idea where it's going.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it's going to end up being something that I think, at least in spring training, I think almost all the players are probably going to get asked something, about oh, how's it feel to be teammates with this guy, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to have to say the right things, oh, we're welcoming him, we're trying to give him a fresh start, all this kind of stuff. And it's just is it worth it?
The juxtaposition of him and Liam Hendriks in the same bullpen, that could be on network TV.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And exactly what we're talking about how Liam Hendriks is going to be a, good clubhouse guy. It kind of is well, hopefully he's really good, because the clubhouse is going to be, at least, if not divided, is going to be at least a little annoyed that they have to keep talking about, Chapman for at least a little bit.
And eventually it stops being a story, but it's not going to be for a while.
Right. Until something, big happens or something else takes the heat off of them. It's not. So as far as other moves go, is there any other moves you guys wanted to talk about?
So I think it's very interesting that Jared Jones is very available with the Pirates.
This is something I heard get brought up today, and I also thought that was pretty interesting. Jared Jones, another young pitcher. Is he 20? He's 25, I think. But coming off of, a breakout season.
He's 23.
He's 23. Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, so coming off of a breakout season and
in the shadow of Paul Skeens.
Right, but the Pirates need offense.
Maybe a first baseman who could hit 40 home runs.
So you're saying they should trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, so from what I've heard, I heard more, throwing Marcelo Myers in the deal, or there's going to have to. It's not just going to be.
It's not going to be a 1-for-1.
Yeah, it's not a Casas for Jared Jones kind of thing. You're going to have to part with
a Nick York for Quinn Priester.
Right.
Yes.
Not.
And I mean, there is a relationship there, obviously, because of that deal. And it's Ben Cherington, who knows Boston, who, he's been around the block here a few times. And so I think that if Jared Jones is legitimately available, that is the next move that the Red Sox should make, because you could slot him in at the number 3. He doesn't have to be your number 2. Let Houck be your number 2 starter. But if you slot Jared Jones into a 3 or 4, him or Bayo, doesn't matter. You talk about a young rotation all of a sudden, whereas the Sox have been rolling out the oldest rotation in the history of baseball for the last 5 years. Now you're no longer dealing with, is he able to throw above 93 miles an hour? You've got a rotation of Crochet, Houck, Jones, Bayo, and Giolito. You're in discussion for the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah, definitely. The other person that they keep talking about being available is Mitch Keller, also from the Pirates.
Right.
Not quite as good as Jarrett Jones, but also probably someone who would be available for a slightly lower price tag.
I think you'd be at the bottom end of the top 10 of prospects in the Keller conversation.
And I mean,
that's where a Cutter Crawford could come into the equation as well.
Yeah, because I mean, he's 28, so a little bit older, but he had basically a 4.5 last year. Mm-hmm. He was an all-star. Granted, he was an all-star from the Pirates, but still.
Every team has to have at least one.
Exactly. So I mean,
Kenley Jansen.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about Kenley Jansen's market, surprisingly.
No, nothing at all. But I guess when you tell everybody that your goal is to retire a Dodger and the Dodgers don't need a closer, people tend to stay away.
Yeah. So
I will say, when the Danny Jansen news broke, all I saw was Jansen signs with the Rays, and I was like, no way Kenley went to Tampa. Wow. Which there's some rumor out there that they're willing to listen to offers on Pete Fairbanks, which I think is interesting. I don't think they trade him in the division at all, but man, if he's available, I don't care who else is in the bullpen. Pete Fairbanks slots in as an all-star caliber closer.
I think, whatever happens with Tampa Bay this year is going to be super interesting, just because of their stadium situation.
Yeah, how nuts is it that we're going to have 2 major league clubs playing in AAA stadiums?
Yeah, and that Tampa is paying the Yankees to play in their is that single A stadium, double A? Forget what it is.
I think the capacity is only like 8,000.
Yeah,
which is standard Trop numbers.
Yeah, so I don't know, the finances for that have to be so wild to know that your gate receipts are only going to get up to a certain amount, and you're paying a rival team to play in that ballpark.
More money than your current your current payroll.
It's just it's going to be bizarre. So, any news of Tampa Bay, is dangling someone out there for trade, I'm going to believe it, because I have no idea what their payroll capacity is going to be for this season, next season.
Nobody's going to want to play in the middle of July in Florida with no roof.
Well, I wouldn't have thought that anyone would want to play in Sacramento in the middle of July.
But at least it's not going to rain on you every day out there.
No, but it's going to be 107.
Yeah, It's a dry heat. It's a
Oh,
dry heat.
it's true. It's true. The sweat just evaporates right off of you. It's perfect.
That's why Vegas makes so much sense.
So I mean both of those American League teams playing in minor league ballparks is going to be absolutely wild. I can't wait to see what the home run numbers look like in these places. It's going to be super bizarre. So
Devers might hit one 500 feet.
Seriously.
Just give them metal bats for every series at those stadiums. Just see, let's go wild. Golden rule, metal bats.
Yeah. So I think as far as Tampa goes, though, I don't know. I don't know what their trade.
We've made deals with them in the past, and they fleeced us every single time.
Yeah.
Nathan Eovaldi.
Yeah, that's the one positive that's come back to Boston.
And as I said, he just re-signed with Texas, so
I thought there was a chance he would come back to Boston.
I honestly did too, and I mean, I was hoping he would. Obviously, he would increase that age of the starting rotation by quite a bit, but he was.
I think Walker Buehler makes a lot of sense as a tier 2 signing at this point. I would have to think that outside of a trade for somebody, and I mean, I guess they're talking to John Means. The next free agent pitcher that they bring in has to be right-handed. Just because if you're going to slot in as a number 2, a number 3, or 2, you're not going to run 2 lefties back-to-back out of your rotation.
You think Walker Buehler would slot in as a 2?
No. What I'm saying is I think no matter who they sign, unless it's John Means, they've got to be right-handed.
Because, I mean, I was going to ask, when you talk about Walker Buehler, where in the rotation would you slot him at this point?
I think right now he would have to slot in at the back, but I think that if you look at the bot, and I know what the numbers are, but I think that put him in a situation with a team that actually wants to have him pitch for them, because that doesn't seem like the Dodgers do. I think that Buehler could end up being a number 3 starter.
So would you have? So I mean, obviously we would put Crochet in front of him. Who else? Houck
for sure. I think that Buehler could beat out Bayo, and I love Brian Bayo. I think that Brian Bayo has the potential to be a frontline starter. Now with Crochet here, he's obviously not going to be for a while, but Bayo's got some growing up to do to be able to be a frontline starter, and he showed that after his outburst earlier in 24. But until Bayo puts it together over more than a half season, I think that Walker Buehler's stuff would play better if he has the right people around him.
I mean, I haven't watched a lot of Walker Buehler. I did see him this postseason, which I think,
right,
wasn't his, wouldn't be on his sizzle reel or anything that he sends to teams. But he pitched, I guess, admirably in a couple of those games, but
yeah,
it wasn't anything that got me thinking oh boy,
I think there's something there. I really do. I think there's something there.
Okay.
I might be crazy. But
yeah, so I mean, Walker Buehler, would you
trade for Jared Jones?
Yeah. Would you rather have Walker Buehler or John Means if you're going with a pitcher who is?
I mean, realistically, I don't think John Means pitches more than a half season this year.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And even that, I think, might be being a little too optimistic. Means has shoved against Boston until he got hurt. Was it an opening day no? He took into the 8th. Yeah. So the track record with Means is stronger, but I think that Buehler has the higher ceiling.
I mean, I think
the floor is higher with John Means, without a doubt.
Yeah, I guess depending on how he comes back from the injury. Really.
Yeah, and that's the elephant in the room right now.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of I think that's also the elephant in the room about Walker Buehler is that
and Lucas Giolito and Garrett Whitlock.
Right. I mean, as long as we're, when you brought up, Vaughn Grissom, and I hadn't thought about him in forever, I also haven't thought about Garrett Whitlock in forever.
I forgot he played baseball.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he's another guy who, I don't know. I think he has to in bullpen, right? Like,
there's no way they try to start him again. No way.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
If Garrett Whitlock is even entertained as a starter, Andrew Bailey has lost touch with baseball. Craig Breslow has lost touch with baseball. Like, it's just not there.
I mean, he showed signs of being okay, but I don't think that he has the.
I think he could still be a dominant reliever.
Yeah, I think that he can be an okay starter who probably doesn't pitch that many innings, or he could be a dominant reliever who pitches every 2 to 3 days, kind of thing.
And I think that Whitlock, if he comes on the way he should, I think that as Red Sox fans, we should be okay not paying for somebody, and I know it's not on the same level, but not paying for somebody like a Tanner Scott, because if Whitlock can be a back end of the bullpen piece, I would rather have Whitlock, who's already here on an extension, who's not costing us any more money than he already is, which Tanner Scott would. And he's proven in Boston in the bullpen. Not everybody can come to Boston and pitch. Not everybody can come to Boston and play, period. That's one reason why, going back to the Cardinals, like, I have no interest in Sonny Gray. He can't pitch in a big market. Keep him as far away from Boston as possible. But Garrett Whitlock can. He's proven so. In what arguably is the toughest route to take to that.
Yeah. The only other rumor I wanted to touch on is something that I heard this morning being bandied around on MLB Network, and that was more talk about Teoscar Hernandez. And I mean, obviously, this is now the second off season that we're hearing at least some rumblings about Teoscar Hernandez in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this probably makes less sense than it did last year. But I was wondering if, how you guys feel. Is there something I'm missing here? It feels like we sort of have plenty of outfielders.
Yeah, I think that if you trade for Teoscar, Willier's gone.
Yeah,
you can't keep both.
Or moving Massa, which is a hard task.
I don't even know if I consider him an outfielder at this point.
Yeah,
and technically, yeah.
DH outfielder.
Right, exactly. How much more defensive versatility does Teoscar give you over Massa? They're sort of like, they're basically pretty even as far as runs saved and stuff.
Yeah.
Teoscar's actually pretty fast considering his age. I think he's in at least the 80th percentile for sprint speed, which was a surprise to me when I saw that. So I think he has more athleticism than Masataka.
I mean, I don't know. Have you seen Masataka's running form?
Oh my gosh, it's a thing of beauty. Ask Lou Merlone.
I know.
Merlone's favorite person is Masataka when he's stealing.
I cannot get over anytime I can hear Lou Merlone talk about Masataka's running form. It's just what a blessed day,
Man, I could listen to Lou Merlone read the phone book.
Actually, for the article I wrote about Masataka, I was like fervently searching GIFs, just trying to find any GIF of him running because I was like, I need to have this in my piece. So
and his pants are pulled up like all the way, like above his
my
waist.
gosh.
It's so funny just to see him.
So you're
He's
saying
the world's best tourist.
So you think that Teoscar is more athletic?
Yeah, and has power too, which you want from a DH.
Right.
I think that Massa could tap into that, though.
Yeah.
I think he does have a shot at it. I don't know. I guess I
celebrate his home runs the same way I celebrate Rafi's home runs. You know?
I think that with the Red Sox kind of prioritizing, at least I think they're trying to prioritize defense a little bit more. It doesn't make sense to make such a lateral move of, picking up a guy who is going to be sort of a mediocre outfielder or strict DH when you already have one on your roster. And so if you can somehow move Massa for something decent, maybe you consider it. But otherwise, the Teoscar thing doesn't make that much sense to me.
His swing profiles well at Fenway.
It does.
But I mean, that's really the only strong argument you have for Teoscar Hernandez at this point.
Right. And he breaks up the lefties is essentially the big thing.
I don't know. Last year, and it seemed like he was almost begging to come to Boston last year. And so, last year it made a ton of sense, but he has been on the record multiple times saying that he loves LA. He doesn't really want to leave LA, but should Boston come calling, I forget who it was, Pepin or one of the guys that you can't really trust, said that if the Red Sox were going to offer 3 years with, I think it was 60 or 75 million with an opt-out, he would be in Boston today. That was during the Soto sweepstakes. I'm a hard pass on that.
Yeah, I think that is probably what it's going to take, is somewhere in that range. But
let the Dodgers defer his salary and let him stay out there.
Well, what I was going to say is, according to what has been floated around, is that he and the Dodgers aren't really close on their numbers, as far as re-signing. So if for some reason he falls, is there an amount he falls to that makes it good for you? If he's going to be 2-50 or 3-50, does it become okay?
I think 3-50 is palatable, but even then it just adds to the log jam.
Yeah.
And it's going to force your hand somewhere else. And if that is trading Wilyer Abreu, no. I'm not against trading Wilyer Abreu, but to just stick Teoscar Hernandez out there instead, let's let Abreu hit against left-handers this year and let him develop as an actual everyday right fielder instead of paying Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, I think that, if a trade does happen where you have to give up an outfielder, maybe then that's when you consider it. But if you sign Teoscar before you make a trade, it just weakens the value of any outfielder that you're trying to trade. So it doesn't really make any sense to do that.
Yeah.
So I think you have to wait until much later in the offseason to have something like that done. He is one of those.
And it's possible that Teoscar will be sitting for quite a while.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, he's one of those guys that I think you might be on the verge of it being spring training, pitchers and catchers reporting, and where's Teoscar kind of thing.
Yeah. And luckily he's not a pitcher, so he's not going to take half a season to warm up. But
yeah,
I think that there is a path to bring Jordan Montgomery to the Red Sox, and I don't think that that's a crazy idea.
You're putting Massa in that trade as a bad contract swap? Okay.
Yes.
I agree. I mean, I think Andrew Bailey and company could fix whatever his issue was last year.
So once again, I got to watch him in St. Louis, and there is so much there to love. And when you're in an organization that the owner is openly admitting is the worst decision he's made as a baseball owner, of course you're not going to want to play in that situation. And there was no way that it was news to him. You can feel that in the clubhouse. You can feel that from the coaching staff. You can feel it from the ownership box before it's ever said. Sending Masataka Yoshida to a place like Arizona where the ball does travel a little differently because of the atmosphere, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it brings in another, I mean, he's left-handed, but it brings in another pitcher with some years under his belt who has got the stuff that can really play up in Boston. And I mean, if it's a bad contract swap, I'll take the Jordan Montgomery side of that bad contract in a heartbeat, because I really think Andrew Bailey and company can get him going to where he needs to be.
And Montgomery also is a workhorse, and Tanner Houck, Cutter Crawford, Garrett Crochet, all of them are coming off of career high innings pitched. And Montgomery would help, I guess, provide balance should any of those dudes face an injury.
Absolutely. Yeah. The starting pitcher is one position you can't be too deep at.
Yeah, and Montgomery has plenty of experience both pitching in the rotation and out of the bullpen, so there is some flexibility there. If he had to be moved, obviously you would probably move Cutter Crawford or Houck probably before you move Montgomery, but it is always nice.
I don't think you'd move Houck before Montgomery.
Yeah, you think Houck is really just in there?
I think after last season, he at least deserves a full season in the starting rotation.
I mean, I definitely think he does too, but I wonder if it came down to if you had someone who was more veteran, like a Montgomery, if you consider Houck. I don't know. You probably I guess it depends how they think Houck would take it. If it would be like a low to his confidence, maybe you wouldn't. But I guess, especially when Montgomery's confidence is probably at an all-time low after everything that's been said in Arizona. So you might be able to move him there without hurting him too much. But
he was another player that seemed to be begging the Red Sox to make an offer last year.
Yeah, it was truly bizarre last year how many players seemed to want to play for Boston, and Boston.
We ended up with Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah, just actively didn't want them for some reason.
And I like Tyler O'Neill. Like I loved that trade. But when Teoscar is standing outside the stadium, like, hey, I would love to hit here. And Jordan Montgomery's like, my wife is doing her residency 3 blocks away from the stadium. Like,
yeah, and I think that's the only reason that I sort of entertained the idea of Teoscar is because I thought, I mean, he could play the Tyler O'Neill role of being, a guy, a big bopper kind of guy who
I would rather have O'Neill back than Teoscar.
Yeah, I mean, O'Neill is closer to a heyday of being a very good outfielder than I think Teoscar probably ever has been in his career. So
absolutely.
But I think that with the outfield currently constructed, there's not as much power as we had coming into last year, unless you really think that Rafael is going to take some big jumps.
I think they hope he does.
Oh, definitely. And I had looked at this earlier, and he actually hit some balls off the wall last year that would have been home runs in other places. I think it was something like 4 or 5. So, I mean, there is power in there. So, I think you could see him get up to 20 maybe, but I mean, he's definitely.
I think that's his. I think he would top out at 20.
I don't think
his best season total.
I don't think he's like a Tyler O'Neill, 30 plus kind of guy,
No.
So
not without drastically changing his game, and at this point, you just do more harm than good.
Yeah. So I think that maybe Teoscar Hernandez could play that role, but I don't think he's necessary. I think the Red Sox have bigger needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you guys want to touch on before we wrap up?
I don't think anything else has come through today. They're still looking for a right-handed hitter in the Teoscar mold, I suppose. Still some bullpen help and want to add another starter, but there's nothing real concrete out there after the Crochet trade. I do want to say that it's very encouraging that as of yesterday morning, the Red Sox were on the edge of the Crochet trades, and then all of a sudden the deal was done.
Yeah.
And I think that shows that Craig Breslow is willing to do the one thing that Chaim Bloom was not willing to do, and that is force the issue. At the end of the day, we're the Boston Red Sox. We should be able to compete with anybody for any player.
I mean, I wonder if Chaim would have felt more compelled to do those things this offseason, because I think that there's a lot of pressure on Boston after last offseason to get deals done. So I don't think there was any way.
And I liked Chaim. I was a fan of Chaim. I don't want to come off as somebody who wasn't. Like, I thought Chaim Bloom did very good things in Boston.
Yeah, I think that over the next probably like 3 to 5 years, there's gonna be a lot of revisionist history as to how
a lot of whataboutisms were happening earlier this week about Chaim Bloom.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially, you being in Cardinal country, you're also gonna, get to hear a lot about
absolutely
Chaim Bloom. And I know when he was announced as, the heir apparent there in St. Louis, there was a lot of like, wow, he did some really great things in Boston.
Yeah.
And I thought, just a year ago,
the St. Louis market was like, oh my gosh, can you believe these things, the trades that he pulled off? And he turned Christian Vasquez into Wilyer Abreu. Like, it was very glowing. And obviously I work with a ton of Cardinals fans, and we were talking today because the Cardinals are entering really year one of their complete rebuild. Like, they have fired their entire minor league staff. They're starting from the ground up at this point. And I said, the one thing you're going to love after next year is that Chaim Bloom loves prospects.
Yeah.
And if he is trading for prospects, he's going to win that trade.
Yeah. And I think that is, we're already seeing it in Boston, and we're just going to continue seeing it for the next couple of years, that those prospects are going to either become, good to great major leaguers, or they're going to bring in good to great major leaguers via trade.
Jared Jones.
Like Jared Jones.
You know what? You can throw good old friend of the pod, David Sandlin, in that trade.
Oh, good. I thought we were going to get out of here without a David Sandlin reference. So
nope.
Nope.
Trade
every prospect have to mention him until he gets traded. Perfect. Yeah. And do you guys have any articles going live on the site? Or are you working on any articles that you wanted to promote before we get out of here?
The last one I put up was which one of the big four was going to be traded. And I said, for sure, Marcelo Meyer. And then literally 2.5 hours later, Kyle Teel was sent to Chicago. So I might have to take a pause for a little bit.
Maddie, you got anything?
Just doing an analysis of the number of left-handed pitchers in the league over the past few years. It's will get published in a while. It's research oriented, but it's there. Adam, you?
That sounds really interesting. I look forward to reading that.
That's going to be really awesome.
I'm currently looking at what I hope is going to be a brief history of trades between the White Sox and Red Sox. I looked up the complete list, and it is quite extensive. So working on whittling that down to just the ones that are going to be interesting. So, probably not like late career Tom Seaver or anything, I'm going to try to be the ones that people actually are going to care about. So, so that's what I'm working on.
That'll be cool.
All right, so let's call this podcast over, put it in the books. When we will check in again, maybe next week or maybe not till the new year, but whenever there's news, apparently we're going to try to hop on here and at least talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think the goal is to turn this into a weekly thing, and
eventually turn it into weekly.
We decided to start it right in the middle of the holidays because we make great decisions.
I mean, we thought maybe it would be a 2-week thing, and then, Garrett Crochet happened, and we thought, well, I guess it's going to have to be a week and a half in between
Yep.
podcasts. So maybe we'll say 2 weeks again, and then who knows? Maybe it'll be sooner than that.
Absolutely.
All right. And
All right.
that's it.
Thanks for tuning in for Talk Sox episode 2. We'll see you guys.